Welcome to DXgov governance discussion for May 4th, 2022, and may the 4th be with you. We will start first with the proposal roundup. If Jitsi lets me share my screen, is the screen share working?
Looks good to me.
All right. No Big Chris this week, Keenan. Yeah, so no mainnet proposals, although I have heard whispers about some ENS proposals, particularly possibly for DXstats in the future. So be on the lookout for that. A couple different proposals that are on the worker proposals, that are in the queue here. Milton contributor proposal, which I recommend for some really cool insights into ETH Denver and kind of like how you make the decision to join DXDAO. Then there's Melanie's contributor proposal, Adam's contributor proposal that you can see over here in DXvote. And then there's also a contributor proposal that's seen some interesting action in terms of the voting for Luchucks. So there's been some activity there as I'm waiting for, let me do a hard refresh. Yeah, and then there are 3 buyback proposals. We had a couple issues with submitting buyback proposals. I mean, some of the proposals through DXvote earlier, but those are back on store there. And yeah, I wasn't sure if anyone had any thoughts on the outstanding proposals. There is one proposal that did not get picked up here that's in the quiet ending period that I'm trying to load here for Luchucks. But yeah, any thoughts or comments on the current proposals? Oh, Ross says, yes, Luchuck's proposal should not pass. It seems to be a duplicate.
Yeah, there was a proposal with the exact same title previously, and it was only a 1-month period proposal. So I checked with Melanie as well and with Augusto, and it looks like it shouldn't be passing. So I think there's enough downvoted currently, but just don't upvote it.
Yeah, and just as they like kind of, I don't know how maybe I look at these or like kind of through that lens of Candy Fork for certain proposals like that. Like that's one like I saw, and then the first thing I noticed, if we get the proposal up here, is it was submitted, a little while ago, but then it was boosted by Augusto actually. And so then it was boosted by Augusto. I was like, okay, well that says something because I know, Augusto's account, he obviously worked on DXgov. But then when it got past the boosted phase, it was voted down by Ross. And so then I was like, okay, well, I know Ross really knows Luchucks what the deal with this proposal is. So without knowing, the specifics, I was looking at those as signals. And then I saw Nathan had voted for the proposal, and then Augusto had voted against the proposal. So all these things are, we're not having these conversations just directly with people, but that's kind of okay because we can read these signals about how things are happening on chain there. It's kind of how the proposal goes through.
Cool thing, I guess, that hopefully will soon, I don't know what's up with DXport right now. The cool thing that hopefully will be coming soon is like the forum and like social layer stuff, which mean that we'd actually have comments embedded right in there. And so we would be able to have a conversation because there's not actually a forum post for this, which makes it kind of difficult to work out if it's real. I actually executed the boost, changed the state on that, and then sort of did a double take before having to look into if it was actually a legitimate proposal. So I guess comments would kind of help us with this.
Yeah, and partially it's just kind of like, as proposals go through, what are the things you're checking? What are the addresses you're checking? Has this proposal, they submitted other proposals? Who do the people vote? Who staked? Good. We need to have as much other context, but we can incorporate into the UI. But at the end of the day, kind of having the on-chain information there and double checking that is also important. Cool. And so that's it for the proposal roundup. There are a couple discussion items that we want to touch on this week. First up is the proposal to stake further treasury assets from JSTAR. Dave, can you walk us through this post?
Absolutely. So JStar is actually Jordan from Stakewise. So I had a meeting with him in Amsterdam during the event there, and we've been holding Stakewise ETH for quite some time now. Stakewise is also deployed on Gnosis chain as the first liquid staking option there. And so this proposal suggests staking both further Ether with Stakewise, as well as staking our GNO we hold in our Gnosis chain treasury with Stakewise, which I think both are really good next steps. We've dabbled a bit with the liquid staking options, and I think there are the three main ones really, which are Lido, Stakewise, and Rocket Pool. And I think the order of decentralization, the spectrum also goes in that order, with Lido being the more centralized one, then Stakewise working strongly towards decentralization, Rocket Pool taking the more extreme approach. And I would say all of these have trade-offs as well. For example, with Rocket Pool, it's very difficult to actually get the validators spun up currently because anyone can validate there. So there are some concerns there. But I think Rocket Pool is also a very interesting option we should be exploring more. But I think Stakewise is also doing a very good job, decentralizing platform further and further. And this proposal suggests taking 2,000 further ETH with Stakewise, and the amount we have roughly 255 GNO on Gnosis chain, which is not a large amount, but it would be good to do that anyway. Just we can also do that completely decentralized, probably through our multi-call schemes on Gnosis chain. So I know 6 people only so far have voted in the poll, or last time I checked. So, well, 7 now. There we go. So if you guys are, make sure to go check it out, read the whole forum post, and cast your vote. The Stake No GNO pool, I actually spoke with them about it. They have a curve pool, and they're not even looking to incentivize it. If we want, they'd definitely be open to talking about having it on Swapper. It's just, I guess, a question for us as well. If we think like such a stable pair, we can be competitive with Curve on, right? Especially with echo routing, it would probably all go through Curve, but they're definitely open to chatting about that. So if we want to discuss that further, we can at any time. Yeah.
Dave, do you have thoughts on like what percentages of like total ETH in the treasury should be staked versus like unstaked, and like kind of diversification of the staking?
Yeah, so I mean that's something Chris and I were talking a bit about, like long-term planning and all of these like strategic elements. I think even with these next 2,000, we definitely still be below that threshold. I don't have an exact number now for the threshold, but of course we want to retain enough ETH to potentially, if we're doing some treasury management stuff, we might be wanting to use ETH rather than staked ETH to take out loans or whatever it might be. We want to have the ETH to be operational, eventually buy more stable coins if we're ever in a situation like that. I think we have just shy of 10,000 ETH right now in the treasury. And I think depending on like other approaches we might take, considering liquid staked ETH as a very passive treasury yield, because it just sits in our treasury, right? So it's a very easy position to take. I think like we could confidently go up to like 40-50% currently. And the good thing is like there's very deep liquidity in these staked ETH options. So at any time, we can also just reconvert it to ETH, right? So I don't know if we need an exact figure now. We do have that flexibility to just unstake it or like return it back to ETH. And actually, one of the big differences between Stakewise and the other tokens is that it actually uses a secondary token as a reward token. So every day you get some reward ETH, and so you're actually also able to compound the rewards, which you're not able to do on neither Rocket Pool nor Lido because they're rebalancing. So we could even use the reward ETH and sell that back into ETH, or use that to pay for expenses, or we could just compound it and stake it into more staked ETH. And
yeah, because I guess the thing that comes to mind, or the question that mind, is that these things are never without risk of some kind, right? There's like you're trusting that whoever's running the protocol or the protocol itself is secure. So yeah, like a diversified, balanced approach, I think makes sense. Just as a protection against what if kind of worst case, like God forbid Stakewise or Lido or something like collapse or have some kind of a hack or whatnot. And I think we can. I'm sure these are pretty well known protocols, so they probably have some stuff published. Maybe we should do a little bit, and this could be on the technical side of things, not necessarily on your shoulders, but do a little bit more due diligence on these protocols and like what kind of auditing they've had done and what's their security model.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd also really like to get some more Rocket ETH. And in fact, maybe, if we can commit some capital to that, maybe it's helpful for them as well to address some of the shortcomings they have with onboarding validated, etc. So maybe that can also be mutually beneficial. And then just
Actually,
to answer, yeah.
Well, I was going to answer, John. There's like 10% of all ETH is staked in ETH2 right now. So I guess we're right now, DXgov is, I guess, a little bit below that average, and this would probably put us above that average. And I don't know if that's where things should be or not. And then within that one, I just shared, and I'll share this link. This is just like kind of the ETH staking market. So you can see Lido has, a pretty gigantic share of the ETH2 staking market, and that about 30% of all overall ETH that's staked in ETH2 is actually like these derivative form of ETH there. So that's kind of just the market there.
Nice.
Yeah, and that's actually also addressing kind of Federico's question about the leveraged staking option. I'd also be interested to hear other people's opinions. I think, right now we're still on the journey to getting regular staked ETH, so leveraging might be something further down the line. I'm also personally somewhat concerned with the market dominance and centralization of Lido, and all these leveraged options currently you're only able to do them with Lido because you can deposit staked Lido ETH as a collateral in Aave, and I believe that's where most of them take the leverage position. But not sure if anyone else has thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, general rule of thumb, right? Additional yield comes with additional risk. So I think it's a matter of understanding those risks and having a balanced approach to it. I wouldn't necessarily be against it, but we should definitely understand what we're doing.
And I do, and Dave mentioned this, I do think DXgov believes in decentralization and its core to its mission. And I, broadly, when I look at Ethereum and the crypto space more broadly, I see two really existential threats to decentralization. One is like in the form of MEV and how that could eventually centralize. And the other, I think, is in staking centralization. And I think I think the Ethereum community should be more concerned about the rising dominance of Lido. And I think like DXgov should consider that in choosing its staking provider and how it's like kind of choosing to get exposure to staked ETH, as that's kind of, I think, again, core part to the long-term mission.
Yeah, definitely.
And I believe the only one that you can use for leverage is Lido's ETH, and that's on Aave, and that was, I think, just added in March, and that's really what's exploded Lido's dominance, because there's just a lot of strategies going off of levering up on staked ETH. And just to, when we think about where the yield is coming from, even for the staked ETH, right? Like no one has harvested that yield, right? Because you can only harvest that yield when ETH2 actually launches, and there's actually a liquid market for getting that yield. So really, this is all like in preparation for a future liquid market, which means there are a lot of trust assumptions going on here. Separate thing about this, I don't know if you mentioned that the proposal also is 250 GNO for Stakewise, and so this I think is really cool signal to have DXgov have both staked ETH on Ethereum mainnet and staked GNO on Gnosis chain. It will obviously not be as much of the GNO, but I think that is kind of like a good setup of the treasury.
Yeah, and also just to touch on the like leverage positions and stuff, there's also been some efforts about like not regarding this proposal, but to be able to invest or like partake in a lot more yielding activity. I think DXDAO has a strong interest in being able to do so through perhaps some relayers. We have a lot of relayers and stuff, and we've had some discussions about how can we maybe build a trustless way of being able to manage the treasury, right? Where you can have oracles, relayers, a couple of checks, some emergency exit positions for liquidations, and that's also something where Jolt could tie into, right, for some of these operations based on liquidations. And I think that's something really interesting, but that probably needs a lot more work and is a lot more further down the line. So the nice thing with staked ETH, right, is that you buy it, you dump it in the treasury, and it's just yielding, right? You don't have to do anything. So that's why I think staked ETH right now fits very well with DXDAO. But a more advanced solution would be really nice to have in the future, and it's definitely something we're having discussions around, and hopefully we'll have at some point in the future.
Dave, where does the APY come from, mainly for the GNO staking?
It's the same as ETH, so it's right now it's distributed by Gnosis on the Beacon chain. And once the merge happens, so the GNO merge is meant to happen shortly before ETH, then you also get transaction fees, right? So later on, it's expected that these APYs increases. But right now, it's just emissions on the Beacon chain. So theoretically,
What do you mean emissions, though? Like the GNO is coming from not inflation, right?
I believe it's inflationary on the Beacon chain, right? So it's theoretically, you don't have the reward until the merge happens and the POS is active, but that's why on Lido and Rocket Pool you can't compound, right? Because it's just priced in, but you actually only really get the reward once you go onto once the merge happens. But people already now are pricing that in Lido and Rocket, and and on stake wise, people are just the market is just paying for that reward ETH, right? So you are able to do it just because the market is buying it.
Yeah, but with ETH, the actual protocol mints ETH and gives it out as a reward, right? Where is the GNO?
That's what Gnosis Beacon Chain is, right? It's a new protocol that's GNO based as like the staking. So like I know there's several people that have DApp nodes that are staking on Gnosis Beacon Chain now and earning rewards, and it's like the same setup that someone had. We're setting up an ETH2 validator in November 2020. I don't know exactly how they because obviously GNO was a token that did not start as out as a blockchain, so I'm not sure exactly how they've translated the whole supply of GNO to it. But clearly, there's also a conversation about burning a bunch of GNO. So
yeah, I haven't seen anything anywhere about whether it's actually changing GNO to inflationary or not.
Not inflationary.
Yeah.
I mean, they have so much GNO.
Yeah, so it's like they don't really need. Is Gnosis company paying the GNO reward, and does that mean that could that's not built in the protocol and that could disappear or reduce very quickly?
I mean,
good question for Gnosis. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine.
I'm not sure.
I'm speculating when Gnosis Beacon Chain goes live, there's the model of fee accrual to the stakers. I'm guessing that Gnosis is subsidizing that yield though, for sure, right? That's why for ETH it's 4.5%, and Gnosis has increased it. I don't know how if that's a number that they're adjusting themselves, or if there's ETH, there's it depends on how much ETH is deposited in ETH2, and that affects the APY. But I think it's just Gnosis using it as an incentive to get people to buy a DApp node. And
in my mind, that the GNO reward on Gnosis Beacon Chain is very different than ETH, because one is a protocol built system agreed, everyone in the world decides that together, and in Gnosis, we don't even know, some person is deciding what the GNO reward is on Gnosis Beacon Chain, and it's coming from a fixed token treasury that in the long run that would run out unless they do some change to the entire system, right?
I mean, at the numbers they're doing now, there's really not any. I mean, it's going to run out in 100 years or something.
Okay.
Right? Like there's already, that's the problem, is they don't need to inflate GNO because they minted so much GNO like 5 years ago. But anyway, it's an interesting kind of discussion to think about. But any other thoughts or kind of comments here? I think Dave had a call to action to vote. We can show a little preview of the results here. But yeah, any other thoughts on this? I guess next step, Dave, this is, there's like a separate proposal that would actually, send the funds, and then the GNO itself actually may be able to be done through the multi-call scheme on Gnosis chain. Any final thoughts here, Dave?
Yeah, no, I think it would be nice if so Stakewise or Jordan submit the signal proposal, right? And then we could take care of the execution. We'll probably split this out across a number of transactions, just because, of course, the staking on mainnet would still happen through the multi-sig. And yeah, like Chris mentioned, we could probably do a small test transaction on Gnosis chain to do the staking directly, and then just do it all through one proposal through the multi-calls. Yeah. Those are my closing statements.
Yeah, closing. Great. Where does the yield come from? Such an important question. Awesome. And then we have two other discussion items, just because we're halfway through, and I think the next one will take a bit of time. So the first one is the draft proposal, DXgov Hackathon and Retreat. This proposal has actually been submitted, but has not yet been boosted. So it's just kind of there. And there's been some interesting discussion on the forum. There was Tommy was on the call 2 weeks ago. This initial proposal is not for the full proposal. It is only to jumpstart this process. And yeah, you can kind of check out some additional thoughts. I haven't had time to reply to it here, but I think some of the questions on like getting a clear idea of the full cost and the obligations of different DXgov team members is definitely an important consideration. But part of that is exploring that with this additional this first step, which would be a $2,500 payment to starts with an L. Lateral is the company. So I don't know if Augusto's on the call today. No,
maybe this is part of this initial exploration. We did learn. I was trying to figure out other projects that have done their own hackathons, and we talked a lot with the Graph, and John knows Simone, I think, well. Like the Graph every year has been doing in San Francisco around a Graph day. They do a Graph hackathon, which is like a 2-day Graph focused hackathon, which that sounds a lot like a DX hackathon. One idea would be, obviously that's in San Francisco, but one idea would be to like gauge the work, and we could ask them for maybe who puts that on for them to gauge the work and cost of what it means to put on like a Graph focused hackathon, and we could use that as comparison, because my guess is it's bigger than we've been speaking about so far.
Oh, that like makes me think I could also ask ETH Global people for like some kind of cost summaries. Would that be useful?
Yeah, I think that would be, because I think that's the key thing, is it's like we almost are needing information on what this would be. And I think in the discussion with Lateral, it seemed to be more about how the cost on the ground would work and kind of the logistics there. But I also think there would be, a lot of other elements to this, particularly like in a marketing kind of content production part. But I also, and so getting all the information from people, Sky and John, I think is a great idea. But I also think there's a huge spectrum of things that can kind of go on in Bogota, and kind of how we're thinking about this. This is also the idea of the retreat, I think, would be something that could be done, even if that, or some type of different event or anything. But I think it will take some time to explore the ideas and flesh them out a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to kind of tag on to that, I like completely support what Chris is saying. I think we need people on the ground in Bogota if we're even going to like be there and have so many contributors there. I think it's important to have, you know, support actually in Bogota.
I like saying people on the ground in Bogota. Like that just sounds kind of cool. It sounds like we're doing something cooler than planning a retreat and a hackathon. But
the one other thing is like the graph hackathon. I imagine like the graph ecosystem's big enough that like 200 people could show up and like hack stuff on graph protocols and ideas related to the graph. Question is like, is the goal for 200 people at this to like focus on DXDAO stuff, or is it just like organized by DXDAO and maybe a couple other co-organizers like Gnosis or someone else, and then people can hack on whatever they want? Like, what's the goal of getting the hackers to what actions, basically? And how
I
would
might
that
be wrong, I guess. Gusto isn't here, but from what I heard from Augusto, I think it's not. I think we probably have things for DXDAO product integrations, but it wouldn't all be that. Like I think it's meant to be more generic. But yeah, maybe ask Augusto.
cool. Yeah, I think some more things to explore. And I actually think we can maybe add some of these things to this thread here, because part of it is just, identifying these things, figuring out ones we can solve, things that we can't. So yeah, additional thoughts, make sure to throw them up on this forum thread. Cool. And then next item is DXD Buyback Program Adjustments Extension number 8 and transfer of 357 ETH. So this is a proposal or format, something that I think can go to a proposal format based upon a discussion that we've had over the last, you could say a couple weeks, but it's the last couple months on different elements of the DXD buyback program. So I put the information here. It's pretty dense, and so I just want to go over it. And hopefully there may be some of the links that are needed to be adjusted, and maybe some of the numbers are affected by the price of ETH and DXD. But hopefully this kind of can clears up things and set it. So I think it is nice and fitting to have this, to be revisiting this in May 2022, because May seems to be the month of DXD. That was the month that was originally launched in around May 2020, and then which minted 48,976 DXD from the bonding curve. As part of the launch, there was also 100K DXD that vests the DXDAO treasury over 3 years. Dave actually just vested, I think it was about 5,000 DXD. He just called a function on the contract, and it just vests to the treasury. And so I think about 67,000 of this 100K DXD is now vested to the treasury. The bonding curve, for those who remember, was shut down. And then in May of 2021, DXD's favorite month, the DXD buyback program was passed to acquire DXD on the open market in a trustless manner. There was the original proposal, and then there's been some clarifications, some adjustments, and then there have been 7 extensions. Since the program was launched, 13,298 DXD has been purchased on mainnet and Gnosis chain at an average price of 0.177 ETH. So that was like the buyback program. In addition to the original mint from the bonding curve, there have also been some DXD issuance from DXDAO's initial 100K pre-mint. So this has really been in 3 areas. You can track there's 475 DXD that has been issued on chain to vesting contracts to contributors. And then there is 458 DXD that was issued to LPs on Gnosis chain and Ethereum mainnet for swapper farming last summer. And then there is around 2,500 DXD that is owed to contributors that has not yet been issued to vesting contracts. So this is really important because this is DXD that is still in the treasury now, but that has been committed to contributors for payments. And there was a signal proposal that passed at the end of last year that laid out the DXD amounts. And then there's been updates for how much DXD has been issued since over the last 4 months to contributors to land at this. So just to get the numbers straight to start here. So that means we had 48,976 DXD that was minted off the bonding curve. If you subtract the 13,298 DXD that has been purchased through the buyback program, and then add back in the 3,433 DXD that's been issued from the DXDAO pre-mint, we get a current circulating supply of 39,111 DXD. Although some of this DXD is still vesting for another 2+ years. So this gives a DXD a circulating market cap of 26.7 million, which is still comfortably below the 45 million in the DXDAO general treasury in the buyback reserve. Yeah, and just that's kind of the background. And I know that was maybe old news to people or kind of specifics, but just getting, I think, the specifics out there is pretty important for how we ended up to where we are. And I think maybe this might change because there's like 3 buyback proposals that are currently in the queue, and we'll adjust this a little bit. But yeah, the sheet has this adjusted there. So then the adjustments and clarifications that are aimed to happen on this, there's really 3 things here. The first is spelling out the accounting breakdown between DXD and the general treasury. Between DXD and the general treasury and DXD in the buyback reserve. And so for those of you who remember, we had this discussion over the last couple weeks and months that in the first buyback proposal, the motivation or rationale for purchasing the DXD was actually to LP on Swapper, because the DXDAO wanted to provide liquidity on Swapper, but did not want to issue additional DXD to do it. After that first proposal, the subsequent buyback extensions, the rationale for continuing those was actually in using funds from the buyback reserve, which is actually the bonding curve contract that is always been thought to be controlled by DXD holders. And because that bonding curve actually supports the price, to use ETH from that to purchase DXD on the open market. But since that bonding curve is tied to the DXD token contract, and we need to be upgraded to be able to get that ETH, there's been ETH from the general treasury has been used. So anyway, this first point clarifies that 3,659 DXD, which is all of the DXD that was purchased up until the first buyback extension there, that is due to the controllable by the general treasury, while the 9,640 remaining, as well as any future DXD that's purchased using funds from the buyback reserve. So that would be any future extensions. That DXD should be burned. And then that has repercussions or follow-on effects in terms of the ETH calculation. So this means that there's 1,873 ETH from the buyback reserve has been used to purchase DXD. There's 2,499 ETH in the buyback reserve. So that means there's about 550 ETH left to be able to be, that could be used to purchase DXD along the same parameters as the previous buyback extensions. So that's the point number 1. I think there was pretty good consensus on that, some discussion about taking an average, but I think it's cleaner to do that. The second one is a very simple clarification on NAV, and something I've actually been meaning to do for a while. If you read most of the buyback proposals, technically NAV is actually just defined as ETH and stablecoins in the treasury. And that's because when we were first launching, that's what it really only defined. But this clause just really extends it to any swapper deposits, because there is an argument basically that the swapper deposits on Gnosis Chain might not count for NAV, even though they really are, I think, treasury assets. In the same way we've staked ETH, it's not just clear in the previous proposals whether that and staked GNO or any stablecoin deposits count in NAV. So this is just a simple one that would just clarify that going forward. This is not anything to do with the larger NAV discussion there. So that's the second one, is to clarify some of the NAV calculations. And then the third one is a future-looking one that says, if and when the DXD buyback program depletes the buyback reserve, funds from the DXDAO treasury can be used to purchase DXD on the open market up to 70% of NAV, so long as this calculation accounts for runway and future funding for protocol development. So I think this is meant to give some confidence of a future after the buyback reserve depletes. I think it is incumbent upon DXDAO governance to as the depleting the buyback reserve, as we approach that, to discuss and follow up on this, particularly as it relates to runway here. But I think this is something that we could potentially run into in, say, like 2.5 to 3 months time period. So these are the three things that clarifies. And then just one additional thing that I think is pretty important. This proposal says DXDAO governance commits to devote further resources and a dedicated DXD token working group to address long-term questions about DXD value accrual and other questions around NAV calculation, product revenue, DXDAO supply liquidity, integration into governance 2.0, as well as runway for product development. I think, where we are with DXD now, there has been a lot of small adjustments along the way over the last, really, you could say year in terms of the buyback program, but 2 years. And I think we need to have a little bit more breathing room and space to figure out a more long-term solution. That's going to take time. And that's why we want to find agreement on these things above and give some idea on how things are going to progress going forward, so there can be some possibility for this. And we need to talk about what this would look like, but it would, presumably be something that is just going to devote some time over the next couple of months to hammering this out. So that's the adjustments and clarifications. The other stuff is just extension. So I'm now going to pause and see if there are any other questions relating to this post. Pause.
Yeah, I think I expressed this on the last call, but yeah, my one concern about, kind of future buybacks would be making sure that, there is ample room in the runway for product development, and that's not being kind of exposed to liquidation. And I like how you've kind of framed this as kind of indicating that, buybacks are still in the cards, but we have a little bit of work to do over the next couple of months and spelling out exactly what the framing will be for how that's calculated. So yeah, overall, I think this is great.
Yeah, and similar to what John says, when we put this on chain, we have to be careful about the wording so that in the future there isn't some caveat, like some word, some sentence that people can misconstrue and say, oh, here it is, it was voted on. Like when we put this text on chain to vote on it, we have to make sure what we're actually voting on, because it covers a lot.
Definitely. And that's why it's important to slow things down and kind of, Other thoughts, anything on the wording or kind of suggestions on ways to make things tighter? Because I think, to John's point, I think we reached this rough, vague consensus where we all kind of agree where things are going, but then being able to translate that into something that can go on chain and be referenced later. That is that's the process of communicating this clearly. So any thoughts on things to add or subtract or clarify further? And then just this would be the same thing. The rest of this is, in addition, this would also extend the proposal. extend the program for another $1 million. So that's kind of the same thing. That's the same process that's been going on for the other extensions where, and especially for the last ones where the ETH to be transferred is in this proposal itself. And then it'll be sent over to Gnosis chain and put in the GPV relay there. I think we have, I think there's like 80, 90 ETH that's left. So I think there's about 13 or 14 more days until we probably run out of that. Depending on the price of ETH, which Dave maybe can speculate or bet against what I think is going to be.
Do we have a consensus view on that? Just kidding.
3,000. Well, that's where it's been for. I feel like that's my consensus for a while. I don't know if I should go on the record with that, but if it's below, buy, above, sell. Cool. Any other thoughts, questions about this, or anything else on the mind? Well, I guess. Okay. Well, I guess we can end it there. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, Chris.
See you guys.
Bye.
Guys.